Do you think that the 49ers players and coaches respect Jalen Hurts? And the reason that I'm asking this is because a beat reporter asked Steve Wilkes earlier this week, or no, maybe it was today. Um, he asked him what things about Jalen Hurts stood out to him, and they really focused on Jalen Hurts' running ability and kind of the way to beat him being make him play quarterback, keep him in the pocket. Yesterday, Nick Bosa had a similar answer, kind of talking about containing him being most important, and talking about the way to potentially like limit his talent and big play ability would be to keep him in the pocket and make him go through his reads and or go through his progressions and decide where to throw the ball in that way instead of letting him kind of run around. So, how do you feel about Jalen Hurts and how do you think the 49ers feel about him? They played
I
him
think
twice.
yeah, I think he's a talented quarterback. I do think that I'm not going to say he's taken a step back. I don't think that's true. I do think that it's intriguing how the discourse this year has been about Jalen Hurts because the fact of the matter is Jalen Hurts this year has turned the ball over a good amount. I mean, he's been successful because he's been able to run the football while also improve as a passer over the last 2 years. That you can't deny. Jalen Hurts has become, when we played him back in 2021. Jalen Hurts was not as good of a passer. He was a guy who looked to target downfield, but he was not that accurate in that realm. I believe he went 12 of 23 in the game where we won. It was an ugly game where we won 20-11 in week 2 of 2021. He's much improved from that aspect. But if you look at how Jalen Hurts has played this year, there are some ups and downs. Hurts has 10 interceptions on the year, has a couple more, I believe, four more fumbles, and so he's among the league leaders in turnovers this year, which is something to monitor on top of what he's done.
Completely. Now, do you think that the Eagles and their coaching staff respect Brock Purdy when game planning? Like when the defensive coordinator is game planning, normally in the beginning of the year, you heard opposing teams talk about limiting Christian McCaffrey and kind of that being the most important aspect of slowing down the 49ers offense. Do you think that that applies to this game? How do you think that uh, the players across from Brock Purdy are going to feel about him?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I wrote about earlier this week, something I saw was defensive coordinator Sean Desai, the new defensive coordinator for the Eagles, said something about Brock Purdy. He said how they respect him, how he's a guy who can go through his progressions. He's a guy who can be that type of quarterback, and that's what makes that system kind of run. Is when you have a quarterback that's able to execute at the level Brock Purdy does. Now, the way that Sean Desai said the Eagles are going to counter him is he's evasive, he's slippery, but if we can corral that element of Brock Purdy, the playmaking ability, the extension of plays ability, he believes that'll hinder Brock Purdy's ability overall. The way to do that, collapse the pocket. And the Eagles, they have good defensive players. You know, Hassan Reddick is there. You've got some nice defensive tackles. Jalen Carter is having a good rookie year, potentially in the front running for rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year. That is. You've got a couple of good players on that defensive front. Josh Sweat's another guy on the other edge, and so I think that when you talk about Philadelphia, that's going to be their goal. Keep Purdy in the pocket. Don't let him extend plays. And then the other thing that they're going to do on top of that, it's really a mixture of two things that kind of blend well with each other. You collapse the pocket, make sure Brock Purdy doesn't isn't able to extend plays, and then at the line of scrimmage, you play tighter coverage. Something Sean Desai talked about with James Bradbury, with Darius Slay. The way that you play tighter coverage, that way on these quicker balls, or not quicker balls, but like these throws that require good timing that come out of Brock Purdy's hands quicker, they're able to contest it a little more, making the margin for error a little slightly smaller for Brock Purdy. I think that's the way that they're going to defend him. So to answer your question, I do believe they can respect him, but I also believe that I also think they believe their defense is going to be able to stop Brock Purdy.
Okay, I like that. I find that interesting that they or that their coordinator kind of highlighted limiting his scramble ability because that's something that we've noticed way more this year than last year, and especially as the games have gone on, as such an or like a highlight of Brock Purdy's kind of ability is when he's kind of making up for that offensive line. The offensive line, when they're struggling, he's usually able to extend plays. But against a team that's kind of limiting that, that kind of goes weakness for weakness with the 49ers. Now, do you think that Kyle Shanahan will be able to scheme against that with having those shorter, intermediate, quick timing throws to guys like maybe Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey? Or do you think that they're going to be more run game focused, the 49ers, that is?
I think the 49ers are going to try and execute the plan that they set out to kind of face last year. Obviously, didn't get the chance to do so with the way that game went. I think the way San Francisco is going to look to win this game is by targeting the linebackers. Philadelphia, they lost both of their starters last year. I thought T.J. Edwards had a good year. Kaiser White was all right, but they lost both their starters. It's Zach Cunningham, Nicholas Morrow. I believe in Kobe Dean's on IR, so he won't play in this one. So you got some average esque linebackers that I think Kyle Shanahan's going to look to exploit. It's finding favorable matchups, placing running backs or placing tight ends against those linebackers in order to create favorable matchups. And I think that that's the way that the 49ers are going to look to execute. It might be a shorter game plan, but in that regard, you're going to be able to have better matchups against the specific group, something that we just saw this past week against Seattle. The 49ers look to target guys like Bobby Wagner in coverage, Jordan Brooks in coverage, guys who are solid linebackers, but not necessarily really that good in coverage. I think that that's what they're going to do again. And I like the comment that Ellis just pointed out. Yeah, he said, I read the Eagles struggle against tight ends. Well, that's because of the favorable matchups that they're able to create. Kevin Byard should help with that a little bit. Kevin Byard, obviously, a safety for the Eagles. Reed Blankenship hasn't had a bad year. They put Sidney Brown in the slot amount. So you've got, a lot of different options, but I do think that the 49ers are going to find ways to move the ball in this one, especially when you consider the last few games, how opposing offenses have been able to move the ball against Philadelphia. Talking about the last three games, which are playoff caliber teams, Philadelphia is the fourth worst defense in terms of total yards allowed. They allow about 340 yards per game in the last three games. And they faced Buffalo, they faced Dallas, and they faced Kansas City. So they've given up a good amount of yards. That hasn't been the issue. And the other part about this formula for the 49ers, I know I'm veering a little bit off topic, but the other part about this for the 49ers is well, the 49ers, if you're able to give them a lot of yards, they're going to be able to execute because they get to the red zone at a high rate. Not only that, they're able to score at the red zone at a high rate. Need to improve a little bit in the way that they attack the red zone. Has been a little less efficient in the second half of the season, but they get to the red zone and they score in the red zone. That's not usually a formula for success for opposing defenses. Philadelphia is going to need to clear some things up defensively, and I don't know if this is the perfect matchup to do so.